In this video, we will look at how to actually ask questions in coding in a structured way by using if statements. So this is just like basically asking a question on something that you did. So I'm going to start off with declaring a number variable. So let's say int number, just call it number. You can see it's of type integer, so it can only store integer numbers. I will also have an input variable there, so I can store my strings. So I'm going to say input equals, let's just use the JOption pane again. I'm going to use JOption pane dot show input dialog. So we're going to ask the user a question, and the question will be in the double quotation marks. So I'm going to say, please enter a number. Now the user will enter a number. And now we want to do something based on whatever the user typed there as the number. So let's just use some simple testing here. So I'm going to use an if statement, and I'm going to explain the if statement now when I'm done typing it. So it will be if the number is equal, let's say 5, then we can do something. So here in the if statement, where's the number? We haven't assigned the number, sorry. So before we go to the if statement, let's just get the number quickly. So remember that the user entered the number, but the number is saved as a string. So we need to convert it. So we're going to say integer dot parse int, and then we want to convert that input. So the input, the text that the user entered, which will be a number value, so it's going to be a 5 or something, but it's saved as text, converting that 5 text to a 5 number, to a number. Then we're going to test there. If that number is equal to 5, then we want to do something. So you'll use the if keyword in Java with opening and closing brackets, and then in between will be your Boolean expression that you're testing for. Just note that there should not be a semicolon there. If the semicolon is there, it will basically do nothing, that if statement. It will never go into that if statement. So make sure that there's no semicolon after your if statement, also not after your brackets there. Okay, so that's an opening and a closing bracket, which basically says if the number is equal to 5, I'm going to do whatever is done in between these two brackets. So in this case, let's just use a JOption pane dot show a message dialog. First argument null to get it to the middle of the screen, and then the second argument will be the text that you want to display. So we're just going to say something like the number is exactly 5. Then let's do another if statement there to test something else. If the number is then not equal to 5, but let's say if the number is greater than 5, we will print out something else. So I'm going to say JOption pane dot show message dialog, again in the middle of the screen, and then the message, the number is greater than 5. Okay, so again we're testing. If the number entered is greater than 5, we will print out the number is greater than 5. Now let's add another one there. We can also say if the number is greater than 10, then we will print out something else. So I'm going to say JOption pane dot show message dialog, null for the first argument, second argument, the number is greater than 10, for example. Okay, so this is just a few if statements there. Let's just see if it works if we run now. Just one thing that I want you to add to your coding, whenever you're using the JOption pane, doesn't matter if it's the message dialog or the input dialog, just type this at the end to say system.exit 0, and that actually helps us to exit our program a bit faster when using the Java X-Swing components. That's an extra import there. So wherever you're using the java.x or javax.swing.star components, for example, in this case, the JOption pane that comes from it, it's always best to add the system.exit there at the bottom, because system.exit exits your program, it force exits your program, but the status is 0, which means that basically no errors occur. You chose to stop the program. So this is system.exit 0. It's a normal exit from the program, but it helps you to get a bit faster exit. Okay, so let's run this application now. So basically, if the number is 5, we're going to print out it is 5. If it's bigger than 5, more than 5, then we're going to say the number is greater than 5. If it's more than 10, the number is greater than 10. So let's just check them quickly. Let's run this. Right, and let's type 5 exactly, and you can see the number is exactly 5. Right, and then you can see the program exits. Now let's test something else. Let's make it bigger than 5. So let's make it a 6. You can see the number is greater than 5. 100% correct. Now let's run it again. And let's make that number 12 now. So now it will say the number is greater than 5 because 12 is greater than 5. But it will also go to this if statement to say the number is also greater than 10. So this is just a normal if statement, and the problem we have now is that if I only wanted one message to pop up to say it's greater than 10 or greater than 5, then this way of doing it won't really work. For example, if I type 17 there, it's going to say the number is greater than 5. I don't really want to say that, but I want to say the number is greater than 10. So there's different ways of using these if statements now in order to get your desired output. So let's change this a bit. I'm going to delete those two. And instead of saying another if there, I'm going to say else if, and then I'm going to say the number is greater than 10. Right, so there's the brackets again. So what is the else if now? So the if there, if the number is 5, let's say that is true. If that is true, it will print out the number is exactly 5. And because there's an else there, not another if, just an else if, it will not go to this else if or whatever we do there. But if the number is not equal to 5, which means this part is false, then it will go. Only then it will go to the else if and test something else. So in this case, we're testing, is the number now greater than 10? If it is, we're going to say JOption pane dot show message dialog again, null for the first argument, and we're going to say the number is greater than 10. So you'll see then only if the number is greater than 10 will it print out this. But if the number was exactly 5, it will just print out this JOption pane and never go to this one. Now let's add another else if there. So we're going to say else if again, if the number is now greater than 5. And then we're going to say JOption pane again, dot show message dialog, and null again for the first argument, second argument. The number is greater than 5. Okay, so what will happen here now? We will basically check first, is the number equal to 5? If it is, it's going to print out the number is exactly 5. If it's not, and only if it's not equal to 5, it will go to this else if and test. If the number is greater than 10, if it is greater than 10, which means that it's not equal to 5, and the number is then greater than 10, it will print out the number is greater than 10. But if that one is false, this one is also false, only then will it go to this else if statement and check, is the number greater than 5, yes or no? If it is, the number is greater than 5. Now the last thing that I want to show you here is to basically add an else statement there. So basically, if this one is false, and this one is false, and this one is false, and all your else ifs and the ifs at the top is false, then and only then will your else part run. So if the number is not equal to 5, it's not bigger than 10, and it's not bigger than 5, it means that it must be less than 5. So I'm just going to print out JOption pane dot show message dialog, and the first argument null, second argument, the number is less than 5. Okay, so then the number is less than 5. Right, so this is basically the if-else-if statements now. So the if on its own will check it no matter what the previous values were. But then if you have the if-else-if type of structure with an else at the end, then remember then only if this one is true, it will print out the number is exactly 5. If that one is false, only then will it go to this one. And if this one is true, it will print out this. If this one is also false, only then, which means that this one is false, and that one is false, only then it will go to this else if statement, and so forth. And then the last else statement is if all of these tests that you've done at the top, if every one of them is false, it will do the default one, which will print out the number is less than 5. Let's just quickly check this one. Right, so let's make the number exactly 5. So it will say the number is exactly 5. And you can see the program exits without any other messages. Now let's check the first or the second one then. The value of 10, greater than 10. So let's type 12 in there. It will say the number is greater than 10. And you can see it never goes to the bigger than 5 one because it's already bigger than 10. So because that one was true, it will not run the rest of the else if statements. So let's run it again for greater than 5. So if it's not equal to 5 and it's not greater than 10, then it must be a value between 5 and 10. So let's make it a 7 there. And you can see then the number is greater than 5. But it won't tell us the number is greater than 10. And then if I type anything else, which is not equal to 5, and it's also not bigger than 10, and it's also not bigger than 5, which means it should be something less than 5, a 3 or even a minus number. So let's say minus 120 and say OK. And you can see the number is less than 5. Now for the next part, let's do something a bit more interesting. So what I want to do now is to just comment out this part. So I'm going to put a /*, so it's a multi-line comment. And I'm going to put it there, end off with a star and a /, which means that this whole part that we now did with the if-else if statements will be commented out. The compiler cannot read it. But we're going to still have the number variable. We're still going to get the input from the user. Please enter. And now we're going to say, please enter your mark. And then we save the mark. Now we're just assuming it's going to be integer numbers there. Let's leave it as integers. Please enter your mark. The mark is saved and the mark is then converted to an integer. And now we want to do something else. Let's look at a few if statements again. So I'm going to firstly check if that number is less than 50, then we know that this guy failed. So we want to print out a message and say JOptionPane dot show message dialog. And we're going to tell the user, you failed. Right, so the user failed then if the number is less than 50. But now we want to have an else part there, and not an else if there. I'm just going to keep a normal else. So what will the else be? If the number is less than 50, this is this if statement then. So what would be the else? It's when the number is equal to 50 or greater than 50, which means that this guy actually passed. But now I want to check also, I don't only want to check if he passed, but I want to check if he's got a distinction. So this is where nested ifs come in. So you can see in the else, I'm using another if again. So I'm going to check there, if then, because I know if we get into this else, I'd put a comment there, the user passed. So now we want to check how did the user pass. So now I'm using a nested if to check. If that number then is greater than or equal an 80%, which is normally a pass, or let's take it as 75 then, or is normally a distinction. So if the number is greater than or equal 75, then we know he's got a distinction. So we're going to say JOptionPane dot show message dialog, null for the first argument, second argument, your message. Let's say you have a distinction. Right, so if the number is greater than or equal 75, we will say you have a distinction. And then the else part here will be then if the number is not greater than or equal 75. But because we are in this else, we already know it's more than 50, or at least 50. So this else then, we can print out show message dialog. What do you think we should print out there? Yes, you're correct. We must print out you passed. Right, so now if he passed, that's the else. We first check if he's got a distinction. We say yes, it's a distinction. But if it's not a distinction, we can just say you passed. Let's just run this one and check if it works. Right, enter your mark. Let's make 50 there. So it will just say you passed, 100% correct. Now let's carry on. Let's try a number that's 75 or higher. So let's make it 95. It will say you have a distinction. And let's try something else again. Let's say less than 50, so 45, and it will say that you failed. So let's try another if statement, or another nested if statement here. So let's say we want this guy to go and write a reassessment in an exam or whatever. So we're going to say there, if then this number, we know now the number is less than 50. But what if this number is less than 50, but it's more than or equal 45, which means that this guy's actually got between 45 and 50, 45 included. So then we'll print out joptionpane.showMessageDialog, and we're going to have null there, and then we're going to say you can write reassessment. Right, and then what will be the else part there? The else part will just be, if the number is less than 50, we know already he failed. But if the number is more than 45, you can write reassessment. The else will be, if it's not more than 45, it's less than 45, so this guy actually failed miserably, so we will just say, you failed. Okay, so let me just remove these extra space there. Okay, so this is basically our whole structure now. If I make this one a bit smaller there, you can see there that we start off, if the number is less than 50, then it means failed. But how did the guy fail? So we say, if the number then is greater than or equal 45, you can write the reassessment, because then it's 45, between 45 and 50, but not 50. 45 included because of that equal sign there. Then the else will be, if it's not bigger than or equal 45, which means it must be less than 45, and then he failed. The else part here is for this if. So if he didn't fail, then we go to this else and we test. If it's more than or equal 75, it's a distinction. What's the else? The guy passed, he didn't fail, but he didn't get a distinction, so we just say, you passed. Right, then for the last part of this video, let's see how we can add some logical operators in here as well. So instead now of saying if the number is less than 50, and then having a nested if statement to check the number less than or greater than or equal 45, we can do the following. We can say if the number is less than 5, and at the same time, that number is also greater than or equal 45. So then I can remove this part. Let me just remove that. And we have the J option pane. You can write reassessment. I'm going to remove this else also. Let's just look at this if statement quickly. So we're saying if the number is less than 50, we know the guy failed. And the number is also greater than or equal 45. So what does the AND do? The AND basically says both sides of this operator must be true for the whole thing to be true. So we're testing now. If the number is less than 50, so let's take a number. Let's take a number of 46. So if 46 is less than 50, yes it is. And the number, which is 46, is also greater than or equal 45. So you can see both sides will be true. Then we print out, you can write reassessment. So then we can put an else if here again. Let's just put some brackets there. Else if the number is greater than 50, sorry, that's when the number is less than 50. So let's just leave it as this. That will be the second else if. So we'll basically check first. If the number is less than 50 and the number is greater than or equal 45, then we know it's between 45 and 50. We print out, we can write reassessment. But then if that thing is false, which means either one of the two sides is false, we're going to test again. If the number is then just less than 50, or we can even say if it's less than 45, then we know he failed. So I'm just going to copy this one quickly. And I'm going to paste it there, and we're going to say you failed. Exactly the same thing. Else if number is greater than or equal 75, you have a distinction. Otherwise, you just passed. Okay, so this is basically just using the AND operator there. We could also use OR operators and so forth. We'll get a bit more into the logical operators later on when we're checking if something is inside or outside a range. But at this stage, this is just checking whether you can do the normal if statements, else if statements, and some nested if statements. Okay, so let's run this application quickly and just see whether it actually works correctly. Right, so let's enter the mark. Let's enter a 50 there. You passed. Right, 100%. Let's try again. A value between 45 and 50, let's say a 46. You can write reassessment, 100%. Let's just run it again. Now let's put in a fail value there. So let's say a 44. You failed, 100%. And then the last one, let's try for a distinction there. So let's make it 98. You have a distinction. Our program is running 100%. That's the net for this video. See you in the next one.